Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm welcoming you here. Back here today. We're going to discuss a new issue, a new lecture on the world financial relations, so to speak, in the world financial relations. And the next topic which we're going to study is called international debt and international loans. This is going to be our subject for today. I would like to introduce a few questions. Actually, we're going to deal with the goals of this specific topic, of this specific lecture. We're going to study the essence and the significance of international debt in the international economic relations system, which is really an important issue. We're going to study, secondly, we're going to study the emergence and the development of the international debt economy. We're going to understand the workings of the international crisis in the debt system and the loan system, which is really a difficult problem in the world economy today, because many countries are indebted. They live in debt. Their GDP ratio, their debt to GDP ratio is really high, and we will also try to understand the workings of the international debt market, of course. This is going to be our topics for today. And finally, a very specific issue are going to be for us London and Paris clubs of creditors. They are the actors, the most important financial organizations, some of the very most important financial organizations who make loans to other countries, to other nation states or corporations. And they are going to be of a particular specific interest for us today. Last time we studied really good issues, really important issues about the international system of economic and financial institutions such as the IMF. We were talking about central banks and the central banking system, how it works. Today we're going to generalize on some of the issues of the global debt, of the global loan system, of the global debt economy, global debt markets. The global debt market is really a great problem for today in the international monetary system, in the international financial system, because many countries live in debt. They live just like many other nations. They require capital, they require investments, and some of these investments come from such institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Paris Club of Creditors, and the London Club of Creditors. So these are the questions, and of course the first question would be the essence and the significance of international loan system and how it's going to work. What is actually an international credit or an international loan? International loan is actually a movement of capital. This is the movement of financial resources in the sphere of international economic relations. We are going to understand how it works, and this system of international loan system is really connected to the international economic relations. They are connected with the currency issues, they are connected with loans, and the main issue is that the main idea of the international loan system is that you just don't take these loans for nothing. You may only take these loans on specific conditions. These conditions include, of course, the interest rates, some of the banking conditions, but most importantly, you should return the loans which you've taken. You should return them to the back to the international banks, to international financial organizations or institutions such as these. You should pay back the principal. The principal is actually the money which you take as a loan. For example, you take a loan amounting to $1 billion. A country, the Russian Federation takes a loan amounting to $1 billion at a rate of 10% a year, for instance. And by the end of the year, Russia has to pay back the loan, for instance, this specific sum of the amount of money, $1 billion, plus 10% interest. That makes $1.1 billion. This is really a simple operation, which is calculated by the banking system, by the International Monetary Fund, for instance. If we owe money to the International Monetary Fund, so the issue of the international loans and the issue of the credit itself, the question of the credit and the system of loans, is that we should take into consideration all these conditions. We cannot take money for granted, we cannot take it for nothing. So you've got the principal, which is the base form, the initial form of the money taken from some specific institutional organization, and we should pay it back. The principal, we should pay back the principal plus a certain amount of interest. So we should return this loan back. International credit is also connected with other economic categories, other economic conditions as well, which are profit, price, money, the exchange rate of one currency against the other currency, the current account balance, which is also a very important issue, and a whole set of economic bylaws in the marketplace, which they are representing and which they make use of. The amount of money I've taken as an example, $1 billion, is a really huge amount of money. You cannot take this money from an ordinary bank. You cannot demand such amounts of money from, for example, Gazprom Bank, because it does not have such an amount of money. It would go bankrupt, perhaps. But whereas other financial institutions, for example, the International Monetary Fund or the Paris Club of Creditors, may give you a loan of $1 billion because there are really specific organizations responsible for that. They can afford giving you or providing you with such capital. Then international credit also includes other features of the international credit, includes things such as that the international credit takes a huge part, a really important part in the realization of requirements to help the economic laws happen in this economy. Especially when you are oriented onto the entrepreneurs, if you try to help the economy develop, credit actually or loans are mostly needed when we take businesses, when we take companies that need capital in the market, and this is the reason for us to negotiate these relationships, this debt problem, which is going to represent some of the basic ideas of the loan system in Russia, for instance, or anywhere in the world, any country in the world. Then, of course, international credit is decreasing the individual cost of goods and services, comparing to their international cost, such as especially when you introduce new equipment to the market, when you introduce imported equipment to your market, which you buy on credit, on loans. And some of the very important kinds of credit here would be we live in today. Of course, other issues would include things such as the conditions of providing loans opportunities. The opportunity for taking loans is really an issue of the economy. If an interest rate to make loans is really high, the economy is not working. Enterprises decide not to take these loans. In Russia, for instance, Russia is a really expensive country for loans. Banks in Russia provide loans at really high rates of interest, and the economy is not developing the way it should be. In other countries, an interest rate is really small. For example, one of the lowest interest rates we may find in Japan. You are to pay only 0.5% a year, and you may get credits, you may get loans at that particular you may get money cheap in Japan. This is the reason why Japanese banks are so widespread in the global economy, why they're so strong in providing capital to other nations, to other companies. Russian companies, especially oil and gas industry, they take these loans from the Japanese banks, from Mitsubishi, from Tokyo Mitsubishi, or banks such as these. They take loans there and pay low interests, which is really good for these corporations. Of course, because Sberbank or other Russian bank takes huge interest rates when they make loans. International credit is also connected with issues such as developing new laws of when we use the international credit, actually, or any kinds of credit, we may be concerned about issues such as what conditions and what are the terms to take these loans. And these loans are really sometimes they're difficult to take for some corporations, because these corporations may go bankrupt. Banks are afraid of losing their capital, and they require some important rules and some important issues, some important conditionalities. They demand conditionalities from you. They want you to sign up to some of the conditionalities that would satisfy their demands. And when you take international credit, when you get it, it helps the economy go really quickly. It helps the economy work more quickly and more effectively, because you've got a feeling that the money is working. You've got a feeling that you should do something really more intensively. You should produce goods and services at a much more hurried way. You should not get some of the problems from the international crisis, for instance. And when you try to use this capital, you should be really careful about that. You should understand the workings of the financial industry, and when you take loans, you should also be concerned about the way your company is working, because when taking loans, it is usually a great responsibility for you, for your corporation, because if you go bankrupt, your company may be the cause for other bankruptcies in the industry, because you owe money to other companies. And I would like to say also that the very important subject here is that international credit, being a specific form of money or a specific form of capital, requires a certain degree of responsibility. And the other industries, other corporations are really dependent on you. And you are dependent on your customers as well. If your products are not purchased, if people do not prefer your products to the products of other corporations, that would also mean some difficulties in creating and giving you loans. International credit is provided in various forms. It can be provided as financial assets. It can be provided as cash. It can be provided as electronically. Today we live in the system of electronic transactions, electronic transfers. We do not need the physical currency anymore, almost. And in the developed countries, this form of money is much more developed than in any country in the world. In Russia, we still use much of the transactions in Russia, many of the transactions in Russia, in the Russian banking system and its currency system are done electronically, but we still use physical currency, and the proportion of the physical currency used is really great. Actually, it's a feature of a criminal economy also, because if your companies and your businesses and the population are using cash, cash makes transactions impersonal. No one will know what you buy, where you buy it, and when you buy it. But when you use electronic transaction, each and every operation is entered into the computer and it exists in digits, and any bank may tell the government, the specific taxation authority, the amount of money you've taken, where you've taken it, and what were the conditions, and when you're going to repay it back. So each and every piece of information is entered into the computer and to the server of specific organizations, and this helps control the money supply, it helps control the interest rates, and it helps control the economy. But still, despite being a very effective tool to control the economy, in the developed countries there are still problems with this specific sphere of economic activity. I mean the criminal economy, or the black economy, so to speak, the gray economy, a really criminal economy. There are different kinds of economies and economic systems, and the way they're working is that when you use electronic transactions you may track the specific flows of capital, of free cash, and these flows can be registered in computers, and this is the way to control the international credit system and the system of credit in a specific country. Well, when we try to understand how the things are working in the economy, looking at this video and watching this is the video which represents some of the basic ideas about how the international monetary system works and the international financial system works. We are surrounded by various financial information. We should be keeping track of the developments in the world economy. We should be keeping track of the major decisions, for example, the Department of Treasury in the United States, or the Federal Reserve System. The New York Stock Exchange is where everything is happening, and the international financial system is really dependent upon these institutions. These institutions are working to provide cash to people. Of course, money is not grown on the trees. It is really an idealistic version of the money supply, but there are 7 stages or steps in which government creates government bonds and money. Everything starts from the elections. Some of the people they just tell you, if you elect them as presidents, as deputies to the parliament, I would spend more and more and more. I would give you more money. I would give you more bonds. Bond actually is a piece of paper. It's a commercial certificate which says that you owe a specific amount of money, and a bond is purchased at a discount rate. For instance, government sells its bonds to the population, the treasuries, at a discount rate, and after a certain period of time, after 1 year or 3 years, you receive the total amount of the principal plus a certain amount of percent. When this government is doing that, you may buy homes, for instance, you may buy cars, you may buy each and every piece of equipment or economic equipment to create the currency to another bank, to another commercial bank, and this bank is going to provide you with cash, and this cash is given to other people. You exchange the cash for bonds, and other people do the same thing. It multiplies across the economy. The money multiplier is working here. Money multiplier is a really important thing because it shows the amount of money which is created in an economy. Recapitalization also a very important thing because when you exchange money back to the currency, you actually make this process, this procedure, recapitalization. If you are given money, if you take money from some bank, you should give some guarantee that you would return this loan, this money to the bank again. And this is why we need this specific sort of commercial paper, this specific debt. This way the monetary system works, and the Federal Reserve, for instance, the Central Bank of the United States, they create money this way. If a government requires $1 billion in cash for national projects, for infrastructure development and things like that, you take this money and it multiplies through the economy, and it goes. In the past, in the early 20th century, each currency, each banknote was redeemable in gold. It was supported by the gold standard. And if you just take this money, this banknote, if you receive it as a loan or as some other kind of financial asset, you may exchange it in the bank for a piece of gold, for a gold bullion, an ounce of gold or something like that. Then stage 3 always comes when governments, when a state is trying to finance some military operations in other countries. It is actually creating deficit because military operations require much money, and when you take that money and when you take loans, you go to a bank, you open an account with that bank, and you receive the amount of money you require actually for your purposes. And the Federal Reserve System and the system of commercial banks is working this way. The central bank deposits some amount of money on account of other commercial banks, and these commercial banks then take that money and they use it as loans to the population, to corporations, and the monetary system is working. And if, for example, a reserve ratio, each bank has two kinds of reserves. Each commercial bank has two kinds of reserves, which are excessive reserves and supporting reserves, so to speak. The required reserves. The required reserves is the amount of money which a commercial bank holds on a interest-free account in the central bank in case of the population coming to you and demanding their money from their accounts. So in order to be able to avoid the bankruptcy of any bank, you should keep money on a specific account in a central bank to help you provide with the currency, with liquidity, so that you don't go bankrupt. And this is the way it's working. Everyone in the population receives money that way, and you may purchase any kind of goods or service. You may buy a home, you may buy a yacht, you may buy a car this way, just taking this amount of money. which is just spraying like waterfalls. This green paper money is just spraying like a waterfall, like the Niagara waterfall. And you take this example as a generalization theory, so to speak. And when you need to pay back this money to the commercial bank, what would you do? You actually, if you have to pay back this money with an interest, you may not, you should be working more and more harder and harder. You should require more, you should demand more wages or something like that in order to be able to increase the supply of money, to get more capital, to get more cash. The true definition of inflation is that when you take this kind of example, if you use this system, you just create more debt, because the amount of money being given to you will always exceed the amount of money you take, due to the existence of interest rates. You have to pay back the principal with an interest, and this is why the capital, the systemic use of capital, or the money, the revenue you receive, is being transformed to other people, and these people are usually represented by high class and by the highest social classes, and they are bankers, they are the greatest entrepreneurs, the corporations. They rule the economy. The federal government, in order to be able to repay back their credits to banks, they also need IOUs. IOU means that I owe you some amount of money. This is a bond, or obligation to pay money back. And this system is being reproduced on a massive scale. It is the way the monetary system or credit system and the financial system is working in any state, in any government. And now taxes are actually a specific amount of money which the government is trying to use in order to be able to repay back the amount of money it takes from the commercial banks, from the central bank, and things such as this. You pay taxes, the income tax, for example, in Russia, we pay income tax, corporations pay corporate tax, and other kinds of taxes, value added tax, and things like that. So there are many taxes that we pay to the government, and this money is being used in order to be able to repay back the amount of money you've taken as loans from the central bank or any other big commercial bank. And each dollar or each ruble in existence requires that specific operation. And this is the way the currency is being used in an economy. This is the way we create the currency. And in the end, if we take a specific amount of cash, the debt can actually goes to infinity. It creates only a specific amount of money, but the amount of debt, it will always be much more than the amount of money you've taken as loans, because again, I repeat it, you should pay back it with interest, and it is impossible to pay back all the loans which you take in any monetary system, because of the existence of a certain amount of percent, a certain amount of interest rate. The system is working in each country. It was created it is functioning actually in centuries. The banking system was introduced this way, and it is still in existence like it was in the 15th century, in the 16th century, all the way into the future, into our days. Today we've got the same problems. If we clear the accounts, this operation is called the clearing. When we clear accounts, all which remains is debt. And someday this kind of Babylonian tower is going to collapse, and we're going to have a really serious financial crisis. And we actually had this financial crisis in 2008, 2010. There was the global financial crisis. And there is such a notion as debt ceiling, which is an upper limit for taking loans. In the United States, this limit always is being increased by the federal government, and the US Congress has to again make a specific law if you want to increase the government debt. This is not the system the founders of the United States wanted. They wanted a really free currency. They wanted to free their civilization from the bank. Always are being enslaved this way. You have to pay money back, and you're working for the bankers, and this is the way our system is working still today, and it is in existence upon this particular day. And because we need medical care, we need fuel, we need food, we need each and every kind of goods, service that is in supply in the market, which is delivered onto the markets. And everything is being purchased out of debt. This is really important, and some economists say that this is the slavery, the enslavement of the entire population. Actually, I think this is a sort of propaganda, social propaganda campaign being here in circulation, that banks are monsters that just make you slaves of their activities. Actually, I don't think it is so really difficult to understand, but I think that you cannot go without banks. You cannot do economic activity without banks, because this is the institution which has responsibility for the monetary system and the way it is working. The international monetary system is the system that requires opportunity, which requires the basic conditions to provide you with cash. And this is the way it always worked in the past, and this is the way it's going to work in the future. All you have to do is saving money. This is really important. Each and every person on planet should be thinking about their future. And you should be thinking about your children, about your grandchildren. And if you do not do this, then you will be a slave of the international monetary system, a slave of banks. You should be really careful about choosing banks. You should be really careful about taking loans. And the government also should be aware of that. Now, this is a scheme which repeats this is the same procedure in 7 steps. So again, I would repeat this. If you want some amount of money, you go to a commercial bank, or if it's a government, you go to the central bank, you require some amount of money. In exchange for banknotes, you give them bonds, and these bonds are guarantees that you will pay back this money in a specific period of time in the future. And there are 7 stages of that. The banks create the currency. The currency is being created using these 2 kinds of reserves: excessive funds and required funds. Excessive reserves and required reserves. You take this money and you multiply this money and the whole economy, and this is the way it works. And the amount of money being given as loans to other people on deposits. It goes to deposits in other banks. If you take money from a commercial bank, if you are given this amount of money, you may put it into another financial institution, you may put it into another local bank, into another commercial bank, and this is the way you create more money, because that bank again should be aware of making or creating the required reserves, which is an interest-free account in the central bank, and that way the monetary system is working. For example, if a initial loan was $100 and the reserve ratio was 10%, that means in the end you would create $100 plus $10, which makes $110. And in the end, if I take a money multiplier would be a ratio which is counted such as this, or like this. You take just 1 and you divide it by the amount of required ratio, and you get this multiply effect, which is 10 times. Out of each dollar you may create 10 times more money than was previously made as loans. And of course, the government itself uses many techniques. It uses many generalized ideas about this monetary system, but this is a system which we have, and we've got no way of getting rid of it. If we get rid of the banking system, that would mean a total collapse in the economy, because there will be no institution that's going to control the monetary system. Who is going to control the monetary system if not an institution which has the responsibility for doing that? And people, the confidence for the bankers is really great, and despite financial crises, despite their financial activities, we're still using the banking system. We still understand that the bank is an institution, which the commercial bank is an institution that helps the economy work, because they give us money which we invest in enterprises, we invest in goods and services, in the production of goods and services. What are the sources of international credit? The sources of international credit include the amount of money which is being temporarily taken from enterprises in the process of capital movement in the form of a specific amount of money. This is the source. And of course, the second source of international credit is going to be the savings of the population. And like you know, as you know, the financial system works in a very specific environment. And a very difficult issue to understand here is that when you take money which is being mobilized by the commercial banks, you should give it back as loans, and the balance between the savings and loans, the balance between the expenditure and the amount of money you take should be equal to your income, so that you are sure that you pay back the amount of money you've taken as credit or loans, in order not to go bankrupt in the end. For companies, this is really one of the main issues for corporations, for its workings, for its activities, business activities, is actually you need to have some amount of guarantee that in the future you will be able to repay your debt. If you do not pay your debt, that means that the company you owe money to is going to go bankrupt as well, because you owe money to that company. And the other company is going to ruin a third company, because each and every enterprise in an economy is connected with each other. And if one company does not pay back its debt, that means other corporations are going to collapse as well. And commercial banks as well are going to collapse, because these enterprises do not repay their money back to commercial banks, to these commercial banks. And this is a real problem in an economy. And still today, when a crisis is damaging the economy, it usually happens this way. Crisis, a financial panic, usually happens this way. For instance, if I'm a student and you are students, if you take a student loan to be able to study at a university, you take a loan, and if you do not repay your loan back to a bank, to a commercial bank, that would mean a crisis for you, but not for the entire economy. But if many students are going to fail in paying back their student loans to the commercial banks, that would mean a crisis, because banks will not receive their cash back, and they will be on the edge of bankruptcy. The way it is done is that we need some cash, we need some guarantee, we need the amount of money we receive as cash. And if, for instance, there's rumors about some bank being on the edge of bankruptcy, then what would people do? What would you do if you suddenly learned that your bank is going to collapse, it's on the verge of collapse? You're going to go to this bank and demand your money back. Give me my money back, you would say, right? If you've heard something really dangerous about the money you keep in that specific bank on your accounts, on your deposit. If you deposited money there, you would go to that bank and demand money. If you just one person, nothing will happen. The bank will be still working in a normal way, and nothing will happen actually. But if many people have the same idea about this bank, if everyone starts thinking that this bank is going to collapse in a few days, and this kind of rumor is really dangerous for the monetary system, for a specific bank, that means you would just there will be a line of people queuing in front of your bank, and they will be demanding their deposits back actually. And if a bank does not repay the loan, if a bank does not repay the deposits, does not pay back money to other people, this bank is going to collapse. And many crises, many financial and banking crises were done in this, happened in this way, this particular way. That was there were really waves of financial crises in the United States, in Europe, and there were world crises as well that were happening across the globe, across the world. In 1907, in the United States in 1907, 500 banks collapsed that way, because someone puts through a rumor that an important bank in New York is going to fail, is going to collapse, and people started demanding their money back, their cash back. They were saying, give me my money back, give it to me back. And it all ended badly. It all ended really dramatically for the economy. There was a banking crisis. I can't repeat, 500 banks collapsed that way. And after that, they started to think about creating an institution that would help stop this system from damaging the economy, because if a banking system collapses, no transactions can be made in the economy, and each and every specific company, each and every specific individual, just ordinary people, will all live using money or currency. We purchase goods and services every day, and we transfer money to our parents, we transfer money to our children in other countries if they go to study. For example, Russian students go to study in Europe, and you may you should actually have this system to make the system working. What is the other way of providing cash to people abroad? And this is the only way actually it can be done. We should always be concerned about the issue of the credit system and the monetary system. And they were developing a structure for many decades. In the United States, they developed it and they introduced it by the early 20th century. The US Federal Reserve System was created in 1913. There was legislation which was put through the government, and this act was called the Federal Reserve Act, and it created the central banking system the way it is organized until this day. You cannot imagine, I just cannot imagine again, I repeat it, but I cannot imagine a government working without banks. I cannot imagine the general population working without existing or living without debt or without money. It is not possible. Like I said, money is a specific tool for us to handle things. If we live without money, we would be some sort of really prehistoric people. We should keep some sort of land in order to be able to provide themselves with food. But if I've got money, it says that I may receive a specific amount of goods and services in exchange for the money I receive as wages. Being a teacher, I cannot do many things at the same time because it requires all the time I've got, all free time. And this is impossible for me to produce all kinds of goods and services which are in existence in an economy. And this is why this is completely impossible for me to live without money. The money is a specific tool, a specific mechanism to make things happen. I receive, I provide you with my services. I deliver the teaching services to the population, and I receive back in exchange for these services the amount of money which is called wages or salary. So this salary is for me the basis of existence, and I take that money and I go into the marketplace and I buy each and every kind of product or service in existence there. And this is the way the monetary system works, and the international credit works in the same way. There are functions of international credit, of course, and the credit actually, what does it do in terms of functions? The credit allocates resources. It helps allocate resources more effectively, and in a specific period of time, some economic actors in the marketplace understand, or actually each and every good, if you require some kind of good or service, you would purchase it the way it is. You would purchase this good or service no matter how much it costs, because you're interested in that specific product. And there are some sort of economies of scales in these transactions. When, for example, you make exchange in goods and services using some gold and silver coins, and today it is of course impossible. We do not live in the gold standard, and this system is called now, we use credit money. This is Federal Reserve notes in the United States, or Russian banknotes, the banknotes of Russian rubles in Russia. And this is the way our system of the banking system works. And then, of course, international credit speeds up or accelerates The international credit accelerates concentration and centralization of capital. What is actually the concentration of capital? We take as an example a company which gets some profit, and if this company takes that profit and invests it again back to the production, or reinvests the money being taken as the profits or being received as profits, it would create more capital and more goods and services, and the national capital would increase that way. If I take the centralization, for instance, I did have two companies which were producing analogous goods and services, and they decide to merge. Now, out of two companies, I've got one company. The capital of this company increased by the amount of the capital those two companies had in the past. The capital is increased, but the national capital did not increase at all. Today would include things such as this. The international credit, of course, is something which helps accelerate the production process or reproduction process in an economy. International credit stimulates foreign trade. It creates really favorable conditions for foreign private investments. It tries to develop, it ensures a continuous flow of capital across the countries, across nations, across borders. These relationships are trying to make the economy work. Because without investments, without any money, without loans, your business is not going to survive. In order to be able to produce something, you've got to have some amount of money which you can invest or reinvest back into the production and receive more money. International credit increases economic effectiveness of the world trade and other types of economic activity abroad, or foreign economic activity abroad, international business. International credit is actually much more favorable, or really better to use, because interest rates here in the international loan system, in the international system of credit, the money is cheaper in this particular sector, and this is the way. This is an opportunity for international companies to receive much more cash than they would otherwise have if they were local companies. If you're a local company, you may get your credit, you may get a loan from a local commercial bank, and usually, not usually, but always, their interest rates would be much higher than those in an international bank or in an international money market, in the international loan system. And this is the reason why the transnational corporations were so successful, or have been so successful in the 20th century, after the Second World War, after the Bretton Woods system, and they were really successful in that because of the developments in the international debt market. Loans are cheap there. You may take much more loans than you would have otherwise in the local monetary system. and the local system of credit and debt, because taking loans here in Russia is really expensive, whereas if you take loans from international banks, you would make much more profit because you do not require to pay back really huge amounts of money, which is really impossible. It will be impossible for you to survive that way. Well, again, I think I should say a few words in conclusion, I think that some of the issues which were highlighted today are going to build a specific block of knowledge in and the block of competences, a block of responsibilities which you may take in this monetary system of ours. I would like to say very specific things. I would like to thank you for your attention here today. You were really attentive today. I thank you very much for for your respect for the things you do. I'm just happy to see you back here again in a week's time. I would be happy to greet you again here. I'm expecting you to come into my lectures, and I will be delivering more information about international credit and international money in the future lectures. So thank you very much. Good luck. Take care.